And we can have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Mom? Here. Commissioner Roth? Here. Commissioner Smith? Here. Mayor Neely?
Here. The first thing is, are there any future work session agendas that you want to see coming forward?
No, I don't think.
I had one, but it's gone. So we'll come up with them later. We have here two discussion items before us. One is the urban renewal interviews. I'm going to let our city manager speak to something in a moment, but no decision would be made upon these interviews. We would simply have the interviews, and there's some issues that have been raised, and I think I'll let our city manager, perhaps our city attorney, discuss them if you would.
Okay. Well, today, early today, and I think partly yesterday, the city recorder and I both received questions about the process and concerns from a couple of the applicants, Carter Stein and Nancy Walters. And Nancy, I'd responded to their concerns yesterday, but late this afternoon we got word from them by email that they were withdrawing from the process because they didn't feel like it was a process that they wanted to participate in. And we shared the emails with you so you can see their own words. Mm-hmm. I did ask the city attorney, though, to be prepared to talk about the process that you're using and what the parameters are. As you probably know, the process is the commission's prerogative on how they set it. There are limitations on what you can ask and not ask, and I'll let Ed talk a little bit about that. I know there was some concern about whether they could see the questions in advance, for example, and some concern about whether they were going to be asked different questions.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I didn't understand Nancy's to be a withdrawal. I thought she said she would not participate at this time.
Yeah, that was her words.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so, and Carter's was
Mr.
withdrawal.
Stein said withdraw. So
yeah.
If you don't show up for an interview, some people might think that's a withdrawal, but that's up to the commission to make that decision. I will say, before Ed talks a little bit about the process that you used and the flexibility the commission has, I looked at the emails that they sent, and one of them referenced a process back in 2008 and was under the impression that it had been a closed session meeting. Now, Nancy, I'd cleared that up, that it wasn't a closed session meeting, but then when I read Ms. Walters' email, it sounded like, well, but I was asked not to be in the room. That I can see where there could be some confusion here, and I'm thinking about the process that I've seen commissions use in other cities for these kinds of appointments, which is typically, even though it's a public meeting, what councils typically do if they have, let's say they have a half a dozen applicants, they will have the city clerk at the door, and the city clerk will say, as a courtesy to the other applicants,
right,
would you mind waiting outside until your name is called, and then you come in. Now, the applicants could still say, no, I'm a citizen, it's a public meeting, I insist on being in there. But that courtesy is often requested by the commission, and I've not seen it not honored before. So that could be the recollection that Ms. Walters had versus what we're doing today.
And I think that is what did happen, as I recall.
And the commission here would probably, I mean, if you had multiple applicants, it would make perfect sense to say, as a courtesy, at least until you've been interviewed. That way that they all, one person doesn't have an advantage over somebody else.
And that's what happens at all our advisory board interviews, where I've requested them to interview candidates that were applying for positions. We simply ask them to wait. They could come in.
Right.
But
it's a request.
Yeah, it's a request. And, of course, the disadvantage to the person being interviewed is somebody's hearing the questions ahead of time. And,
right.
Yeah, so.
It makes sense to ask. And
right.
That could, I was just searching around for some reason for the confusion, and that's the only thing that really jumped out at me. So, Ed, do you want to talk a little bit about one of the conclusions that one of them drew was that the process wasn't sufficient to protect their constitutional rights and so forth. So I thought Ed could talk a little bit about that.
I've only seen the emails. I've not been involved with any part of this before about an hour ago, and that's obvious from the way I'm dressed. Any of these interviews are public meeting items. You can certainly ask somebody not to come in, but they have a right under statute to be present, to be part of any public meeting. The rest of the public has the right to be part of that meeting. And I'm not sure there is anything more to say. There is no exemption under the Public Meetings Law for interviews. And as far as appropriate questions, there are questions that can get you into legal trouble, sex, gender, those kinds of things, obviously. But any question that is relevant to the appointment that you're making is certainly askable by you. So.
We do have one of the candidates is here. We've advertised this. We know we're doing the interviews. This withdrawal, I believe, happened today. I mean, we got these emails today.
A couple hours ago.
I particularly have no desire to slow down the process, but I don't know how the other members of the commission feel.
Well, we only have one applicant,
Yeah.
so I think we should send it back and have Park Place submit some more, and have it come from the whole neighborhood.
Well,
Have the city
We
collect the applications.
We determined that last time that we weren't going to overthrow the bylaws of the committee, so to select from the whole neighborhood isn't his question anymore.
well, we could request the steering committee to interview anybody that was interested, as opposed to the process that we
Right.
had. I mean,
I don't understand their process anyways. That would be a good process question to ask.
but
Where did they advertise them?
I'm ready to move ahead with.
I am too, and I think we should go ahead with the interview. Tom Guile gave us probably a longer description here of his interest and so forth, and he is here. You're not scheduled to come up for an hour, but if you're willing to come up now, then you need.
At 3 in the morning.
We were not.
Now, we got some round robin questions. There may be some clarification questions that we ask as we go through this process. And I'm going to suggest, if there's no problem, starting from my left to right, to each one of us take a question. Is that okay? And if somebody has a follow-up question, then go ahead and go
Comment
ahead
then.
at that particular point. Yes. So, Commissioner Mum.
Please provide us with a brief introduction of yourself, your background and experience, and why that would make you a good Urban Renewal Commissioner member.
Thank you. And just before I say that, I'm glad I'm here, and I have a lot of respect for myself and what I do, and I respect all those people from neighborhoods who came here last week, and I wasn't about to let them down. So I'm here
Good.
because those people did what they did for all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Tom Guile. I've been on this planet for quite a long time. I'm plenty nine. But my experience and knowledge, I've been in Oregon City itself over 8 years now. I've always lived in the Multnomah County area, Southwest Portland neighborhoods. I was on that neighborhood association as a representative to the cable television. I have, since I've been here, I've been a secretary of a neighborhood association. When I first got there, I've been vice chair 2 years under chair, Steve, 2 years under Nancy. I became vice chair on the new CIC under Damon Mabee, took over for Damon for his final year, and then elected in my own right by a margin of 11-2 to take it on for the next 2 years. My experience goes back for this particular position to, and I'm sure it's going to come up later this evening, but mediation. What a lot of you don't know is that in my decade-long employment at Fred Meyer, I was trained as a project manager. My responsibility was to help with the merger activity between QFC and Fred Meyer. That was a major merger, and somebody had to be in the room, record what was going on. You had to document what QFC did, what Fred Meyer did, and find a way that you had common grounds. Not only did I do that, I did Smith's Food and Drug in Utah, and so in my project management role at Fred Meyer, that was my capacity to mediate. And there's other examples of mediation that I'm sure we'll get into throughout the evening. I see I've got 3 minutes, so I hope I did okay.
Well, I don't know that we're not trying
I'm
to...
just kidding. Is that what is brief, or would you like more?
I think that was okay. How about the rest of you guys?
I don't have any follow-ups on that.
Okay.
So now what do you see as the purpose of the urban renewal?
To me, the urban renewal is the prudent use of taxpayers' funds to improve blighted areas for the financial and, I'm trying to think of the right words here. There's a great definition, but in my definition, a prudent usage of taxpayers' funds to improve blighted areas and to help financially grow the city. Brief as that. And also, I should add, to listen to your constituents, to listen to everybody, and make up your minds on what you think is best for the city now and in the future.
Why do you want to serve on the city's Urban Renewal Commission, and what specific experience or views do you bring that will be helpful to our goals, some of which you've already answered, but...
Right. Why do I want to serve?
It's a big question.
Stumped you already.
I don't need this position. Some people need to do different things. I don't need it. I don't need to be... I joked around a long time about running for commissioner or mayor. I don't need to do any of that. I'm satisfied with what I do right now and who I am. I don't need the position. I think the position needs me. I think that everyone needs my advice, my candor, my integrity, the fact that I listen to everybody. And I said it before, and to several of you at different times, I really do want to listen to everybody. 400 people, when I sat in this room here and I heard somebody came up, the people have spoken and you better listen to them, or else, kind of that theme. And I thought, well, 400 isn't the entire city. 400 is a good, strong group of people, but I can pull together that many for an event, whether it be a parade for Rocky or anything that goes on. I want to know what everybody's thinking. That's almost impossible, but you just don't get intimidated into making decisions. And I think I'm independent enough, and I think I show that by being here tonight on my own.
Thank you. Do you have any specific projects or goals for urban renewal that you support, do not support, or feel need to be included or deleted from our program?
I don't. I'll be honest that I don't think that somebody who's been on the outside has enough knowledge. I don't care if it's the rivers, the cove, any of those. I hear about them. I hear about them as chair of the CIC. But I'm not privy to the documentation and the information that you all have to even make a decision on any of that. So I have no preconceived notions on any projects. I do know that if we're going to do any projects, you need to have possibly, like the Cove or other ones, you need to involve more volunteers, such as scouts who may want to help with planting the trees. Involve the community more to make something worthwhile. If they feel that they're a part of something that you've asked them to be involved, then I think that's kind of a role I take too, to involve more people.
So a volunteer coordinator kind of role?
Volunteer coordinator, but to help make decisions from an independent standpoint. But you need to involve more people if you want something to be accepted by the people.
How do you see the role of the Urban Renewal Commission member, and what would your expectations as a member of this commission?
Don't follow the last part of that question. What are the expectations as a commissioner?
As a member.
Your expectation.
What is your expectations?
My expectations.
And your role.
Excuse
And
me.
your role.
My role is to be an equal partner with everyone that's on there. I'm not sure if actually I believe that all of you commissioners and the mayor are equal partners as well. And I think everyone has a decision role. I think everyone needs to listen to more people. And my role is to be an active member and an equal member with all the rest of the individuals. What was the last part of that question? I'm sorry.
What is your expectation as a member?
Expectations. My expectations are the same as my role. My expectations are to be an equal part, not to be intimidated, but to be able to make decisions on my own based on what I'm hearing and what I read. And my expectations are to be the best person I can be as I've always tried to be.
I've got a question to ask, but first I want to do a follow-up on her question. Sure. Now, you're going to be the Park Place representative, okay? How would you distinguish that role as opposed to one of our roles, for example?
Okay. As a representative of any neighborhood, you listen to what people are saying in your neighborhood, but as I said earlier, a small group of people cannot dictate to you what you need to say or do or how to make your decision. You need to, if I had to, I'd reach out to more people. I'd open up an email address and say, I'd like to have everyone tell me your thoughts, and I'd like to have your real name and phone number so I can call and ask you. But I would say that when you're sitting on that committee, you're hearing more things and you're reading more documents than is always open to the public. You have to make that decision based on what the entire picture of the city, because it may be an impact for Park Place, and you can certainly go back and tell Park Place what you've learned and what you're thinking, but you have to base your decisions that are going to impact the entire city based on the entire city and what you know that other people may not. Is that what you
I'm push you on this because
Go ahead.
you're having email address and so forth.
I just
I'm
threw that
thinking,
out.
no. Well, that's okay, but you have a neighborhood association. I was kind of curious of how do you say, and you're on the steering committee, is that right?
Correct.
And so I'm kind of curious is how you see your role within the confines of a neighborhood association. I don't mean confines, but within your role in the neighborhood association, how do you see your role there?
My role on the steering committee or my role as commissioner?
And you're a steering committee, but you're
Both.
part of the neighborhood association group as well. How do you see yourself communicating within the neighborhood association structure?
I'm not sure but I think you're asking, am I going to go and attend meetings and talk to people and tell them what I know and be a regular speaker? When I was chair, I put out a newsletter, the first newsletter that had been put out in over a year and a half, and spoke to different concerns. Now that I'm not doing that newsletter and someone else is, I would make sure that you have a column supplied to them telling people so that they can read it, what's going on and what's coming up. I mean, we know we have constituents letters from our senators, Wyden and I just got one. I can't think of his name. The other guy. No. But you know that they kind of let you know what's going on, and I think that if I was in a position like this, it's just as important to let Park Place residents know through that avenue. There's never enough people at the meetings that we're going to reach everyone, but the newsletters do. And also through the local media. I respect our local media to report what's going on, and I'm open all the time to write another wonderful article.
I have another related question, but I think it'll work as another follow-up on a subsequent one. So I've got one to read to you now.
But I have a follow-up.
Okay.
Okay. So you had said you're not going to let a small group kind of dictate. You're going to take information from everybody.
Correct.
But can you see the correlation between the steering committee and the membership? Because it seemed like the membership voted for 2 people, and the steering committee said these
Boy, I'm glad
3.
you brought that up.
So I just want to know kind of what your thoughts are on that. I don't have all the information. I don't want to start something going. I just kind of wanted to know, kind of everybody has to have a voice, kind of.
And I'm really glad you brought that up. I was hoping that would come up so I could address that.
Good. Thank you.
Last spring, when I became chair, when I stepped in to be chair because of a resignation,
Right.
I immediately went to work on various things. One of them, as we all know, and I'm going to bring it up because mediation will come up, I spent an intense weekend after several emails went through, especially to Mr. Frazier and other ones,
Yeah.
that a meeting should not be held. And I'm going to answer your question in a roundabout way.
Sure.
I had to walk a fine line between this group and this group, let's say. There was never groups really in Park Place until the Rivers came up, and then all of a sudden we had this group and this group. And it really didn't happen until January, until someone called a meeting outside the normal bylaws. But anyway, let me get back to it. I had to mediate and decide what was in the best interest of our community. I owe no allegiance to anybody. I'm, as I said earlier, independent. I went ahead with the advice of Mr. Frazier and other people, and I conducted that meeting. What a lot of you don't know is that I was phoned and called to a pre-meeting before that with Mr. Fred Bruning and Mr. Parker. And at that meeting, I have no fear of meeting with anybody. I wouldn't be here tonight. So I met with these individuals, and at that meeting, I was it was a friendly meeting. I was impressed by Mr. Bruning and the other ones, but I also remember that Linda Van Heverbeek tried to convince me that I had to run this meeting in a certain way, and I said that's not what I'd said with Mr. Frazier. And I actually got Mr. Frazier on the phone right in front of everybody and said, this is the way I will hold the meeting, but it'll be a public meeting and not a general meeting of Park Place, because it had been called, irregular or not. What I'm pointing out here is that I mediated that by stepping in the middle and say, I will conduct the meeting and I'll make sure it happens. After that meeting, I also followed up by saying, okay, it's time that we look at our bylaws, and I appointed Mr. Nick Dirkman as well as Carter Stein to be on a committee, again, from different sides of the viewpoint, and together I added some things to our bylaws, and both of them added their different points, and we refined them, and we brought them to the public. Again, a mediation of bringing people together to coming up with the correct bylaws. That bylaws were presented to our people at the general meeting in May. There was 50-some people at that meeting.
Great meeting.
It was. I was really proud of it.
Huge,
And that brings up another subject. At that time, I was really proud. I couldn't believe it. I thought, I went out to the neighborhood. It had never happened before. I divided Holcomb Boulevard, which is most of Park Place, into quadrants. And I said, we need to start having representatives on this side, up in north, and on that side, and down below. I went to the Oregon View Manor. No one had done that. I went to the church. Asked all of them to start being involved. I went to the PTA meetings at the local school. I did everything I could to start being more representative. When it came to our steering committee, I told them what I was doing and said that it was time that some of us start phasing out. We had been there since I've been there. Some of those people have been there on the committee forever. Some of them I had on the email list I'd never seen before. I never met Nick in eight years until he came to one of those first steering meetings. I really didn't know what he looked like. Where I'm going with this is I did everything I could to reach out, and that night I had made name tags so people could probably say I'm a resident or I'm a guest. And I went back during Scott Burns, I think it was Scott Burns' address. It was about 45 minutes into it, and I wanted to count to see how many people were actually in the room. So I stood at the back of the room and counted. Then I counted the name tags. I estimated there was about 30 from Park Place and 20 from outside Park Place, rough estimate. And some city folks from the city staff here. I was pleased about the fact that I was able to pull that off. But later in the evening, as things came to the vote, some things were confusing, why it was taking so long to count and what was happening. The sheet at the back of the room where the sign-ons disappeared. And a lot of things were happening that I was confused about. So we came to the city. You offered us to go to mediation, and I know this is going to come up, and that's where I was leading with this. I listened to that intently, but I brought these deck of cards. I wanted to show you something here as an example. Okay, when I worked with QFC or Smiths or Fred Meyer, you had these people ready with some cards, you had these people ready with some cards, and they each brought to the table something to mediate with. They had a common interest.
Right.
It was trust. You're going to come and do something. What happened after the election is all the cards were suddenly stacked over here. And this group over here had nothing to go on. The election, you were right, was by our bylaws. And so there was nothing that could be done. I alone cannot go to mediation with these people. It takes a whole group. And this group had felt that the trust had broken down. You don't know whether you're going to be, I guess in the terms of Halloween, trick or treat. This was trick or trust. Do we trust? Are we going to get tricked at this time? So the mediation that was advised, it was a good advice, but you have to have enough equal playing field and people to have cards to even deal with. Those people who walked away from that meeting, they had nothing. the titles or the positions have been taken away. What I was trying to achieve had been taken away. So that brings us to the bylaws and what you were talking about. Those bylaws were put in by at least 50 people, whether it be 30 or not. What happened on that last night of the general meeting here is at the back of the room where I was standing, I repeated numerous times, our bylaws state that, and again, this was agreed upon in May by both sides because it had not been in the bylaws before. We needed a process. The process is the steering committee, which was nominated and voted in back there in May, are the representatives. They're the ones who show up at all the meetings. They're the ones who do usually the work.
Right.
Several people that night said, well, let's get rid of the steering committee. And Steve, I was proud of him, said, no, it doesn't happen like that. They were duly elected. Well, let's change the bylaws. Well, that takes 30 days, Steve indicated. But they were upset, well, we want to throw out all the process. Well, the process has been there in all neighborhoods for quite some time. Those two individuals that got nominated, again, I kept repeating that our bylaws say that it has to be approved by the steering committee. In spite of that, the proceedings went on and they nominated those two individuals. Now, I did not know those individuals. I had not seen them before. All I saw was the back of their heads, and it said, let's nominate them. And when somebody brought me back our own bylaws and said it said a minimum of 3, I said, that's right, it says a minimum of 3. But that's assuming that they will bring their themselves or something to the next steering committee so we can at least find out who they are. So at the next steering committee meeting, and I'm getting to the end of this, we have Carter, Nancy, myself. We had most of the committee there except for Don Slack and a couple other people. But the point is we were there and Steve said we had a quorum. Our group, I guess you might say it, our group, I don't belong to any group, but if I have to, I always take the side of the lesser. That's why I was a Duck fan for years before they became famous. They wanted to nominate only those 3. And I said, do we have a CV from these other individuals? Are they in the room? If those other individuals had taken the time to come to that room that night and introduce themselves, offer what their experience and knowledge is, I would have considered them and probably voted them to be included with it because that's the kind of person I am. There was no CV. There was no resume. There was nothing. And I asked Steve, didn't they even submit anything to you? And it was as if they felt they could bypass the whole process.
Or do you think they weren't informed? Were they invited to the meeting, do you think? And they just...
That would have been up to the chair of the neighborhood. I'm not an officer.
it was off the topic.
But then, again, they may be really good people, and
Yeah.
I've heard that they might be, but I didn't know who they were, and so when it came to voting, I voted for 3. Then, this last Wednesday, I thought maybe those other individuals might show up and present themselves and
Sure.
say why they deserved to be included. But as far as I knew, they weren't in the room and nothing was said. So at every opportunity, I've tried to mediate, I've tried to be fair, and I tried to say if those people had come in to any one of the meetings and said, here I am, here's what my credentials are. And I'll tell you another thing. At that last steering meeting, even though we all knew each other, for the record, I made Nancy and Carter and myself state what our qualifications were
Sure.
and who we were.
Sure.
Because I felt that needs to be in the record that we did that.
Yeah.
That's a long
Absolutely.
answer, but I wanted to make sure I got that all in for you, that I've reached every chance I can.
That's
Okay.
good. So, I'm done with my follow-up.
Okay. I'll have
Probably
a couple,
now,
I'll have a couple more, but we'll give you some other questions. In your opinion, is tax increment financing a viable tool to use for economic development? Explain your answer. Yes or no?
I can't honestly answer that question until I've studied that a little bit more, to be honest. I know about what I've heard from, sitting on the CIC, but I don't know enough about it to totally give you a proper answer, and I'll be honest.
'Cause that's what urban renewal, of course, is about.
Yes, I know that.
Okay. Thank you. You're not in the interview. Go ahead. Tricia Smith.
Okay, I think this has partially already been addressed, but do you believe that the urban renewal's representative from Park Place neighborhood should represent their own views or that of the neighborhood or both?
I think they should take into consideration their neighborhood, and I also think they should take into consideration all the facts that their own neighborhood doesn't know. I am not quite sure, even let's use the rivers as an example, how much you were allowed to tell the public of what you were seeing in your documentations and your executive session. So I don't know how much of that, as a representative, you can actually go back and share to your public. So with some kind of respect for the process, I believe you can tell people, this is what I'm hearing, this is what where we're working, but I would appreciate having your input. And then come back with that. But again, as I said earlier, it's not just all Park Place. If I was only Park Place, then I wouldn't be on the urban renewal representing the whole city, and I believe you're asking for people to come in to hear the general populace.
Actually, you would be just in the Park Place.
I mean, there was.
So you only listen to Park Place and you only vote Park Place?
No,
No, but that would
That's
be,
who you're
no,
representing.
that's who you're representing.
That's who you're
But
representing.
just so you know, you can share, I mean, all of the documents are public.
Well, not executive
except for-
session.
Yeah, except for Zach, exactly.
There's a lot I didn't know about the rivers. That's why I never once made a comment about the rivers.
Yeah. So
I was
just
at
so
all the
you-
meetings, but I never made a
Just so
statement.
you know, the only thing that
You
you
made
can't
statements
share
before this
is-
commission about the rivers.
Not about the rivers. I said afterwards, after the recall, and I'll be glad to address that.
So, just so you know, anything except for the exec is public record, so you can share any of that.
Okay?
Next.
Given the divide in the Park Place neighborhood, how do you plan to gather and report information for all sides? I think you've kind of answered that, too.
Yeah.
Same.
You have kind of answered that.
Now I'm going to have a follow-up, unless you want to expand on your previous answer. I've always been curious. The Rivers Project came to us on two different occasions.
Say that again?
The Rivers Project came up on two different occasions. I don't know how long you were on the steering committee. The Rivers Project has been before this body for years. I'm kind of curious, given the fact it was such a hot topic, why wasn't CenterCal invited earlier to make a presentation to the Park Place Neighborhood Association?
I was not the chair, and I'm not aware of that. I
Well,
can't
the
speak to
steering
that.
committee is not just the chair.
Yeah. You were vice chair.
I was vice chair under two different
Yeah.
chairs.
Yeah.
And neither of those
I
chairs
know why
were
the
elected.
my question is, why
Yeah.
did the steering committee ever extend an invitation to CenterCal to make a presentation before it did? I mean, it was going on for years.
Okay, and I have no idea. Did McLaughlin neighborhoods call in CenterCal? Did any neighborhood call in CenterCal?
Yeah,
I
can't
wasn't
answer
aware.
that
No.
question. I can't answer that
As
question.
far as I know, no neighborhood had done it. Ours was to be the first, and with it falling right during the time that it became a hot topic issue, that's why it became controversial in Park Place. I don't call the meetings. We get together as a steering committee and make suggestions about who the next speaker should be, and during that 4 years, I didn't see hardly anything exciting. That's why membership dropped off. And I know Betty had mentioned it last time at the steering committee. I know that two of you three called for the closure of Park Place, and she's right.
Yeah.
And because of the fact that it started with Steve and went downhill with just the meetings were dead. 3 or 4 people during some of Nancy's year. There was maybe 3 of us at the meetings.
Yep.
Not even all the steering committee. It was Nancy Carter and I. And I don't mind telling you that I said that about Park Place. We might as well shut it down and take a time out.
Yep.
And in fact, I met with Mr. Frazier earlier this year, and I said all neighborhoods have a problem.
Right.
If you have the same exact people coming to every meeting of the CIC all the time, and you don't see a lot of turnover, a lot of people coming in, you're not having the goal one. You're not having
Yeah.
the participation
But I
of
guess
the people.
that was part of my frustration the
Yeah.
other night, is because there was 2 that were voted in at the general and 3, and it's like, aren't you guys all together as one? Can't we just have 5 people be interviewed? I mean,
As I
don't
said, if
know.
those 2 had come in and introduced themselves and said their qualification. Let me put it this way. If you were where is it? I don't see him here right now, but if you were the head of the employment division of a city, would you pass on 5 people to you if you hadn't checked their qualifications and known about them? If you're going to be a responsible steering committee, you need to vet somebody. You need to check out, okay, yes, they know this, oh, yes. Sure, let's pass them on to the city.
Right.
And
right.
so if you don't even know who somebody is, you can't do that.
I understand.
You don't just, all of a sudden, you said new blood. You don't just bring
Yes.
somebody in, a new blood, and all of a sudden they jump to the top. You have to run the race, and you have to be involved in several different capacities to feel
yeah.
a part.
No, I understand that. I think that there's just not a lot of communication, and that's very sad for
On
me. that's very sad, because I've worked very hard for citizen involvement council as well as you have, and William. I mean, we've reactivated that. We've worked very hard to do that, and it's just sad that there's the communication issue. It's huge.
And I think you've known, I mean, even my emails are signed with about communication. Sometimes it's not what you say, but how you say it.
Absolutely.
And I think you sat as my vice chair on the CIC. You knew how I conducted
Absolutely.
the meetings. I've tried to make them neutral, and I tried to make everyone feel a part. But I'll tell you, I'm frustrated that we may reactivate every neighborhood in the city and more. But if you don't get the rest of the citizens involved, then what good is it?
Right.
When I came in as chair, I went out and I worked it. I told everybody in the newsletter, I want more representation from every area. I want the school involved. I want Oregon View, and I've said
Absolutely.
that. But since I'm not there in the last 9 months, 12 months, I have not seen any active reach out to get all the people and start
Going.
coming to the
Yeah,
meetings.
yeah.
And that's what I wanted to see, and as chair of the CIC or chair of any neighborhood, get more people, and you got to communicate.
Absolutely, absolutely, that's key. So, I don't know where we go from here.
That's the last question that we've got, unless you have additional questions.
Oh, boy, it's handed in questions off Twitter.
We've got a question here. Will public comment be allowed to correct facts? And this is from one of the applicants that was put forward at the at your regular Parkways Neighborhood Association.
And I think that was one of Nancy's and Carter's questions.
The decision that we made was to keep going. I didn't want a 2-2 thing that was going to hold up things, so we made the decision to take the 3 applicants. I have no problem with this, but I think we've had an agreement as to what the process was.
I have a very definite problem with that. This is an interview of Mr.
Yeah.
Guile. This is not a
Okay.
public inquisition.
I presume that we settled on a process for the interviews. We settled on the people that we're going to interview, and I think we need to stick to that. And you would be in a position, if you so chose, to, during the citizen comment period of the regular commission meeting, to bring up your concerns. But this is the interview process, and we'll make the decision. We're not making a decision tonight. We'll be making the decision of, one, whether we're going to move ahead with one applicant. That's what we have right now. We've got one interview at the next commission meeting. And during I would say during the public comment period, you could probably raise the issue at that time, or maybe even raise it during the time we're making our decision. But I don't think this is the appropriate spot to do it, because this is an interview process. Thank you very much for your time.
Make some final comment?
Well, your time's up, that's okay.
And 2 things. Number one, I think that was Nancy and Carter's concerns, was the fact that they didn't want this to turn into a debate, or
That's
he
not
said, she
that's
said.
not what came out of the
That's
email.
not-
But I mean,
That's not the concerns we've got. We've got the concerns
I'm
in
just saying.
We've
But-
got the concerns in email, so don't speak for them.
right, but I'm just saying that was, it's kind of scared me too, because if you have people coming in making comments later, well, he said, she said, then I feel like I need to rebut that at some point in one of those citizen comments, because everything I've
Never
said
ending.
everything I've said is a matter of record. I mean, we've all heard it before. You've heard everything I've said before. I came here tonight, as I said earlier, because a lot of people came out and requested you do this, and you guys went through torture. I watched it up, as I said, till 4 in the morning, and I don't envy you in your position. I have not envied anybody on the Urban Renewal Commission over the last year. I've watched so many people go through torment, really good people, and these are volunteer positions, and I hate to see you all and everyone go through that. And I thought, do I really want to put myself through that? And as I said earlier in this interview, I don't need to do this, but I think the position may need me in a sense, because I try to be fair and honest. I think you've seen that. I mean, you can think of all sides of Park Place, but I still am on the CIC as chair, and I'm still trying to do that job. I came here tonight to tell you that I really thought you should choose Nancy or Carter and over me. I'll be honest. I have it written down here, and I was going to tell you why. It takes a long
I'm
time.
going to stop you there,
Yeah.
actually.
Yep.
I'm going to stop you.
I just
We're
wanna-
not getting
No,
testimony on
no,
that.
no.
Okay.
They have to be here testifying for
Well, I thought in an interview
No,
you got to
no,
see
no,
what you
stop
wanted
it.
to
No.
know.
You're not here speaking for Nancy or...
Oh, no, I wasn't.
No, and I'm not, I don't, you've given your interview here.
Okay.
Don't have to
Okay.
talk about anybody else.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that,
Do we get to discuss this
I
process?
don't know, we can discuss it. I think we should if we're going to make a decision to delay it, but we can't really make a decision to delay it until we're in commission session, I don't think.
I don't know. Mr. Ed Sullivan, can we?
Your meeting is a city commission, you are in work session. Traditionally, you don't make those decisions in work session.
Right.
So you can discuss, and you could legally decide, but I'm going to suggest that you hold the decision up to the city commission meeting.
Okay,
No, we can have that debate at that time. Okay.
so we're going to debate all this at the next.
Yeah, we'll make a decision whether, number one, to select the interviewee here, or if we're going to continue the process at the next commission meeting.
Okay, and I thought of a future agenda item.
Okay, she's got a future agenda item.
I'd like to take a look at our urban renewal bylaws.
Yes.
I think that just really needs to be cleaned up.
Okay, very good.
You're referencing work session.
Work
agenda.
session.
Yeah, work
Yeah,
session.
it's a work
Thank you.
session agenda.
Thank you. Work
And
session.
this is, of course, an urban renewal work session
Yes.
item.
Well,
No,
This
I
is a-
think that's us.
This is a
I
city
think
commission
this
work
is a
session.
city commission urban renewal. I mean, we're
This
the
is a
ones.
city commission work session.
See, they
I understand that, but if you're talking about revising the urban renewal bylaws, which the Urban Renewal Commission
Yeah,
has adopted,
yeah, that's her bylaw.
that's probably an urban renewal
Right.
matter.
That's right.
What about the
That's right.
ordinance?
The ordinance is not before us. They're not talking about the ordinance. If you're talking about the ordinance that authorized it, you can bring it up as a city commission.
The ordinance, then maybe that's what we should be talking about in the city commission.
No, we need to talk about the bylaws.
What's the difference?
The ordinance sets up the Urban Renewal Commission and its process for appointment. The bylaws are actually the operational rules for that Urban Renewal Commission. And only...
Ordinance, we should have a,
Okay, I'm
that's,
staying out of it.
yeah.
Why don't I make a suggestion?
We've got
Yes.
another comment here, and
Okay.
the comment here is we should continue, can't base a decision on one candidate, you need to find more.
Well, we'll
We had
talk
more.
about that.
We had more. But in any case, we'll talk about that at the next commission meeting.
So your
So this
suggestion is,
ordinance versus bylaw thing,
yes.
can I ask you what your concerns are, and then we'll know what it is you want to talk about? In other words, is it the structure of the Urban Renewal Commission you're interested in? Is it the
Yes.
operations of the commission?
No, it's the structure.
structure.
There's two levels of it. One is, we had a person that we had here, I can't remember her name, but was essentially a consultant talking about the structure of the Urban Renewal Commission, and she said this was probably the most difficult one she saw because of the number of members involved. So if the intention at the work sessions to discuss whether restructure the actual Urban Renewal
Yes.
Commission as a commission, that'd be a city commission.
That's,
If we're talking about the bylaws of the current Urban Renewal Commission, or a future one, in fact, that would be a work session for the Urban Renewal Commission.
right.
Well,
So the
why,
structure,
so if you want to talk about that, it sounds like you want a city commission work session to talk about urban renewal composition.
yes.
Attached to that agenda item, we will include both the bylaws, which would be their province to change, but of course yours to look at.
Right.
Because that may actually affect.
Absolutely.
Well, and
may-
I think it's important to
We will
let
also-
the other urban renewal commissioners know, even though it's our work session.
Absolutely.
That's right.
We will do
Oh,
that.
yeah,
And we will also
absolutely.
provide a copy of the
Absolutely.
ordinance that establishes the commission. So you'll have both of those documents
Right.
in advance of your meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. With that, we're going on to discussing a city charter work group. Revising the city charter has been a topic that's been on at least since John Williams was mayor. So it's been before us many years. I believe that Ed Sullivan even has notes from that period of time.
Actually, what I have, when the previous mayor came into office, she wanted to have a charter renewal or review commission.
Yeah.
And I took the current charter and I took all of the issues that had been raised during my time as to the charter and put little notes on it. And I don't know if you've seen it or not. There are certain things that are out of date because of election law changes and because of state law changes that we've never brought the charter into compliance. There are the things that you may think are outdated, and but that was a charter review commission. It never got off the ground, and for 8 years that thing has been languishing.
So what we've done is, my recommendation to you is that the commission pick 2 members from the commission, so we don't have a meeting, a regular published meeting. We have 2 members of the commission that are selected from the group to work with the city attorney and I and review the current charter, and then report back to the commission as a whole on what your recommendations would be from that work group. The reason I say that is because it's a somewhat technical review. I looked at some of the changes Ed had made there, and there's an awful lot of gender-biased language in the charter.
Yep.
And but we all know what it means.
Yes.
We know that he means he and she, or he or she. There's some other things in there that there are just a lot of little, almost semantical changes in the document. But when you look at the Commission's other goals that are affected by the charter, like the water rate rollback and these bigger things that are sort of compelling, after you get through your retreat update this month, you may look at that and think about that in context of changing the entire charter or just the pieces you need to change the most. And so I'm going to recommend to you that you appoint 2 of your members from this group to work with Ed and I and Nancy to identify issues and then balance those against the other items in your work plan to see whether or not what the timing is and how much you want to change these things.
I'd be interested.
I would assume that any citizen-led initiative change on the charter would have to go specifically back to the citizens themselves.
Any charter change,
You have to go to the city.
any charter change will
My
ultimately...
my point is that you probably wouldn't want to take a look at them as part of an overall charter change. You'd almost have to look at those individually.
Legally, you can do it either way. And if you want a charter commission to have a whole look at the whole charter, you could do that. It's probably a 6-month to a year project and probably involves a lot of public meetings. If you want to do individual charter changes, I know this was controversial earlier last year, you can certainly do those as well.
Yeah. The thing is, I think what would happen if you're trying to clean up the language, make it a simpler document than it currently is. You would not want to weight that down with things that were originally initiated by citizens, because they might all vote against it, not because of trying to make it a simpler charter, but because you have something that's
For want of a better word, a policy-neutral change.
yeah.
Right.
An example of that would be the water rate
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
And if
Absolutely.
you confuse the water rate issue with 100 semantical changes between the he-she language,
Yeah.
you might end up with a very confused population trying to figure out what are they trying to do. And this is part of what we want to talk to you about on this working group. So if you can agree, if you have 2 volunteers here
I
that want to...
volunteer, I've rewritten it,
I'll do it.
Oh,
so I've got all my
There's the
turquoise
two.
notes.
Well, I went through the process once, but I'd be happy
Okay.
to
Yeah.
ask anybody else who wants to be part of that. But I'd get
Kathy
through
and
the
I already
process.
said we would.
Comfortable with that.
so we will probably wait until right after try to do this shortly after the goal-setting update.
Sure.
And that way you'll have the most current information about everything else.
Okay,
As it
Okay.
pertains.
great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, that does our regular business, and now we can go to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight we have an update on the precinct boundary changes from City Recorder Nancy Ide.
Good evening. The Clackamas County Elections Division revised the boundaries of the precincts in the county to reflect the new legislative districts. And as you know, Oregon conducts its elections by mail ballot, and the precinct boundaries and sizes were set up for polling places originally. And that was to provide convenience for residents to travel to the polls and so forth. But since elections are now done by mail ballot, the geographic size is no longer a consideration. So the Elections Division merged a number of the Oregon City precincts with the intent of having a smaller number of precincts. And just to be expedient about it, fewer precincts meant more streamlined operations. They merged the precincts using state guidelines and requirements for no more than 5,000 voters in each precinct, and then another requirement was that the boundaries need to be contiguous. So on your monitors tonight, under the city manager's report, there is the new map, and I do have it available for the public. Could you go put it up on that laptop over there? It should be right there. I'd like the public to be able to see the map as well. There we go. The map shows the new precincts, and if you live in Oregon City, you can determine exactly where you are. And why is it not there? Oh, it's coming. For those that have it in front of you, Precinct 7 merged into Precinct 1, and that's the Pioneer Community South. I have a map here. If anyone would like to see it, there's the map. For some reason, it's not coming up. Precinct 9 merged into Precinct 2, which is the Pioneer Community North precinct. Precinct 6 merged into Precinct 3, which is the Hilltop area. And Precinct 11 merged into Precinct 5, which is the Barkley Hills area. Two precincts were not affected. That was Precinct 8 and Precinct 12, the Central Point and Gaffney Lane precincts. There it is.
Yes.
Now you want me to say that all over again?
That is where all the precincts, but there's
So you can see approximately where you live if you're an Oregon City resident, and then pinpoint what your precinct is. Really the only purpose is in the mail ballot process when they bring the ballots in and count them, then they know the counts from those particular precincts. So, I just wanted to bring that to your attention because this was in effect at the last election.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions on that one?
No.
No,
Okay.
that's great.
And we're also going to, Nancy also has a recommendation for you about the privacy for executive sessions in this room, which, Nancy, you want me to just talk about this? Because I'm ready to, we examined this over the last month or so, and we've had commissioners requested, and we've been out there with our little, I call it a gizmo, but it's an actual device that reads sound, ambient sound. But our conclusion really is that all of the options, they range in price from $6,000 or $7,000 to almost as much as you want to spend to deal with that. And our conclusion is that if we know in advance, and we always do know in advance whether we're going to have an executive session, we'll just allow extra setup time for staff. And we think that even when Metro comes, for example, and you have a larger meeting in here for executive session, we think we can configure the back room there in the Public Works area for those meetings. And so that's the least expensive solution that we think is also provides the greatest amount of security for you. So that's the one we're recommending.
more so than just locking the front doors and not letting anyone in.
Well, no, nothing's going to provide more security than that.
Well, what I mean is, the problem.
You mean these doors or
Right.
those front doors?
Right. I mean, the only problem there's not a problem with people in the lobby hearing the meeting if there's no one in the lobby.
That
So-
is an option too.
But I know we typically have executive meetings that precede the city commission meetings, so the worry is that we're leaving people out in the cold instead
the
of
rain.
letting them into the building a little earlier. So I don't know if we built enough time in the executive sessions or started them earlier, and then with our dinner break in between the executive session and the regular meeting, then people could come in when we're done. And I know sometimes the executive session goes over, but
That's true. And it goes over, at least here they can come and sit down and be comfortable and wait.
There's a nice covered
For you.
area out there with a bench, and there's gonna be some nice artwork installed, and maybe we buy a heater and stick it out there. I don't know.
love it, Rob.
I mean, that's the only problem. I mean,
There is another option, and that is one of them. We're kind of wired for the Nordstrom level of service, but if you wanted us to do it differently,
No,
do it.
I think back there is all right. I mean, we got sets of locked doors around here, and we're far away from them that unless somebody comes up and
As long as there's not employees watching.
It's the commission's prerogative. If you
That's
want us to go look at other options, we will.
Yeah,
But
no.
that's our
As long as
recommendation.
there's not employees
there-
back there. At the
Well,
top.
that would be part of the setup.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then Nancy Kreshar has some information for you on a DEQ agreement, if she's here. She's here, yes.
I'm here. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I wanted just to inform you that the city manager will be signing a easement and equitable servitudes document between the city and DEQ. This is one of the last pieces of the remedial action plan for the Amtrak site. As you know, that site has been under DEQ cleanup for probably about 14 years. And in 2002, the director of DEQ selected a remedial action plan for the site, which we have implemented with the construction of the station, the depot location, and there are certain areas that are sealed so that no rainwater can get through. And what this document does is it furthers the implementation of that remedial action plan, but it also it requires us to provide annual reports to assure that we are continuing to protect human health and the environment on the site. And it's fairly straightforward. Our city attorney's office has reviewed it. It has some groundwater use restrictions on it. We cannot put any wells on the site. It's telling us we have to maintain our soil cap. And then there's also access restrictions which require a fence around the soil cap area. And it basically says you're going to keep doing what you're doing, that is to use it as a building for leasing or in this mixed-use downtown zone, as long as, well, forever. Unless we decide to change the zone, then we need to notify DEQ and they review it to make sure we're basically preserving the same conditions at the site. So I just wanted to let you know that he's going to sign that because I thought you'd find that somewhat interesting. We have negotiated with DEQ to limit, what they do need to do is when we send in our annual reports, they need to review them. And we have worked with them to limit their review to the equivalent of 3 hours of person time at the state level, which we will be invoiced for every year. So we did really good on that because if we, sometimes they just kind of charge you for administration of files, et cetera.
Right,
So we really, and they agreed to it, which we're very pleased about. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
Great, thank you.
I do have a question. You referred to the Amtrak site, but what all does that comprise of? Just the Amtrak site, or does it imply the landscape?
This is
area?
only the Amtrak parcel.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that's where we did find the previous contamination, Mayor Neely.
Yeah. Okay.
And then excuse me, I believe Nancy, you also had a comment to make about an art installation this Saturday?
Yes, actually, I mentioned this at your last meeting as well, but just so everybody knows, on Saturday there will be art installed in the exterior foyer of City Hall. This art has been, it essentially is being donated to the city through contributions the Chamber of Commerce collected, and the art is in honor of the former Mayor Norris. We will actually be doing some construction on Friday to prepare the site for the installation, but we'll be working Friday and all day Saturday on that. We'll be having a dedication in the future. We haven't got that all organized and planned yet.
Now, the proceeds for this artwork was obtained by the chamber, is that right? Through a
right.
chamber process?
Yes.
So we did not dedicate any money to this?
It was
No.
donated money.
That's right. Chamber of Commerce really spearheaded the effort. I did donate my staff time on the selection committee.
Okay.
And also, Public Works is donating some staff time to help with the installation.
Okay.
That way we get more art.
So you actually see it before you dedicate it, which is that same thing happened really downtown when they installed that. Then we put up that tarp to make it look like it was only a surprise for a handful of people, but it was fun to watch them say, "Wow." Okay. So our next report will come from Scott Archer on an application for a grant for the EOT.
Good evening, Commissioners. At your City Commission meeting last Wednesday, you heard from Clackamas Heritage Partners about a proposed grant that was on a pretty accelerated timeline to get submitted, and just wanted to circle back with you on that. The grant application is being submitted by Clackamas Heritage Partners this Friday, and at your meeting last week, you asked that staff meet with CHP and review the grant application and make sure we're comfortable with that process and what's being submitted. And I just thought, since we're meeting tonight and this is your last meeting before that grant is submitted, we'd circle back with you one more time really quickly just to let you know what's going on. And in case you had any concerns, this would be certainly the time to express those. So Denise Kai and myself met actually just this morning with Dan Fowler and with Gail Yazzolino from CHP to review the application, to talk about kind of how this is going to work. And it's actually a really exciting opportunity. They're applying for some funds through a foundation, and the majority of that funding would be used towards some educational things, related to the interpretation of the end of the Oregon Trail, obviously, at the site. One of the things that was expressed by the Commission in your direction to staff last week was that you'd like to see some component of providing something back to the site, to the facility, and there is an element of that being worked into the application. Because we're moving so quickly, the grant is being written in a way that keeps it generalized enough that we can, if they receive the money and can work through that with the city, then we'll be able to still work on some of the fine-tuning of the details and so forth. But there will be a component of putting a certain percentage of the funding back to some improvements at the site. One of the really interesting things that I wanted to report to you is I think we came up with what might be a really positive idea. There's what CHP would like to do is integrate some very up-to-date technology into the interpretation. So both inside the facility, where, for example, they'd like to refresh the movie in the theater, but also some interpretive things where you are either self-guided or with an actual staff person or a volunteer. But one of the things that came up today was the opportunity for CHP to support something that actually the city would like to do. You received a recommendation at this point. It's been a while from a steering committee and a consultant that said the site needs to be self-interpreted. More of that. There was some discussion about what to do with the buildings or not, and we have an opportunity here to meet some of that goal that was in that report to you. Through this grant, if it's successful, and that is what we talked about is doing some self-guided interpretation outside the facilities, just on the site. This is the end of the Oregon Trail, to refresh some of the signage, to refresh some of the visual appearance of the actual monument at the end of the Oregon Trail on the site, and then to incorporate that technology where a visitor may come in, and it's not dependent on somebody being there to have an experience at the end of the Oregon Trail. So, for example, you would come and there would be some signage directing you. If you're interested, you pull out your smartphone, and here's an application that you can just punch in a code, or there's those new scan bars with iPhones, and they're just a variety of different ways of this happening, where then your smartphone or your iPad or whatever device you had, you can do a self-guided interpretation that is not dependent on taking a paid tour of the facility or or doing something that involves the staff. And this is something that we can accomplish potentially in the near term, while the city is still trying to figure out exactly what to do with all of the facilities there and how that's going, because that's going to be some I think some decisions that are going to take a little bit more time and trying to figure out what to do. So that came out of the discussion, and I wanted you to be aware of that opportunity exists if this grant is successful for us to partner with CHP and vice versa, and to do some of those types of things. A lot of this is still very, very, the details are to be determined. It's very early, and the information is a little rough yet, but that's what kind of bubbled out of this meeting, and it was a really positive and productive meeting. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have about that, because it came at you pretty quickly, and we realized that. But again, that grant has to be submitted, the application, by this Friday, so certainly like to know if you had any other questions, concerns, or things that you'd like us to be working on in that regard.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So if you don't have a smartphone, will you still be able to get the information?
You can be
I had
smart.
to ask,
You can
I'm
be
sorry.
smart without a phone. Yeah, there's going to be physical signage that will be improved as part of this proposal.
Okay.
But you can take that experience to another level if you have the technology or what have you.
Okay.
So,
Well,
yes.
I imagine you could even have the possibility of having something that somebody could actually put a deposit down at the visitor center and act as a pseudo smartphone to take you around town.
Yeah, we've talked about exactly. That's a great point. We discussed that, and again, everything is kind of in the hypothetical. We'll figure out the details, but potentially like an iPad or something like that handheld device that you could pay a small fee or however that would work and use that if you didn't have the device yourself or what have you. So yes, we're talking about really using some technology to do that. So
That's great.
yeah, both kind of the looking at this both self-interpretation as well as you can have the more the full meal deal experience if you want to still work with the folks on site as and that's stuff that we have to kind of work through because we're not sure how that's going to go with building usage and some of those types
Yeah.
of things. But the idea was maybe we don't need to depend on it to be a facility issue to still have that end of the Oregon Trail experience, and that was kind of where it got to, which is I think it's a really exciting opportunity.
Yeah. I think it's great.
I think that's great. And I did have to ask the smartphone question because we all know how smart I am with technology. Not.
Well, we can have trolley rides to the Apple Store, maybe.
I need those.
Okay. So I also want to let you know this. A few weeks ago, actually, I think it was right before the Christmas holiday, I got a call from the city manager in Sandy, and they're asking us for help in establishing an EID in their community. We're one of the few cities in the last 5 years that have successfully done one of those.
Yeah.
And so they
Whatever you
came.
tell them they can't hire Lloyd Purdy.
They already know that.
Okay.
Lloyd and I worked that out before we went any further. So they came this morning, and Eric and I spent an hour or two with them this morning. I provided them some other information along the way, copies of our staff reports and some of the legal analysis that we had that went with it. And then Lloyd, after about an hour and a half, Lloyd came and finished up the last hour with them. They had 6 or 7 people here.
Great.
They have a different model, and their city is a lot different than ours. But and they're trying to raise about half as much money because they're about a third of our size. But they are, I think, hopefully making progress. I just wanted the council to be aware because you go to these Clackamas County area dinners, and the cities do. Many of the cities, in particular, communicate well and help each other when they can. So we were glad to be of assistance to them this morning. Also. Over the last few months, I guess, it's been a couple of different occasions in my lunches with commissioners that we've talked about the foreclosure problem generally in Oregon and then more specifically in our city. And so I started wanting to get some information together about foreclosures in our community. And there wasn't a ready source for that, but our code enforcement people do have contact with and our utility division has contact with banks, for example, when it's a bank-owned property and utilities are in arrears. we have a pretty effective ordinance, and our staff has been very effective at dealing with the banks on those properties. But I finally did amass some information today, and the most recent information we have is that there are a total of 76 foreclosures in the city.
Jeez.
26 are unoccupied, and 41 are occupied. And this is the shocking statistic.
That doesn't add up.
I'm sorry. It's a total of whatever 41 and 26 are. That's what it is. But of that group, only 7 had code enforcement issues. So you would assume, and that's what we were really trying to find out, do many of these homes, particularly the ones that are unoccupied, are we having an excessive amount of code enforcement activity around those properties for decay or solid waste or, in many cases in the summer months at least, high weeds and things like that. So out of that total, only 7 of those had code enforcement issues. So I thought that was really interesting. Now, that excludes 135 units that are being built in a Sequoia subdivision, which if you, I actually have this mapped. I only have one map with me, but this is a map that I can share with the commission, and this is a map showing little red dots around all the current foreclosures. And you'll see out here in the Sequoia subdivision, there's a massive red. Well, there's only room for about 30 dots on there, but there's 135 units being built there on lots that have at one stage or the other been in one form or another a foreclosure. Some of the information on this map is also those that are scheduled for foreclosure. And so this led to more questions for me. These 135 lots, they're actually building those, and when you see this list, I have them all listed out here, being built. They literally are being built there. I think there's been over 100 of those units that have been built so far, and they're renting them. They're not selling them, and they've already been through a foreclosure process, and I think the management company that bought that subdivision got the kind of price they needed to go ahead and finish those building projects, those construction projects, and then rent them out. So that's really what's happening there. So I don't look at that as the same sort of foreclosure concern that I have in other parts of the city. And I wanted to point that out because that does affect the total in Oregon City, but it's a bit of an anomaly because it's within that one single subdivision.
Right.
And so it was sort of a mass foreclosure in that one area. But so the next question that I have that I don't have all the answers to yet is how does that compare for us to other cities in Oregon, and particularly here in the Portland Metro? And right now I only have statistics on one other comparable city that's about half our size and has twice as many foreclosures. So early indications are, I mean, this is below my expectations for what the number of foreclosures I thought we would have as a percentage of our population.
Yeah.
I view this as very positive news, as good news for the city. But I don't want to get too excited because I still want to look at more comparables. And when I have more data, of course, I'll be sharing that with the commission. But I thought you'd be interested to know what we'd found out so far.
And we have somebody who wants to make a comment on foreclosure specifically?
Oh, my God.
My name's Dan Holliday. I live right here in Oregon City, and you have a constituent here in Oregon City, and I don't know if you've heard from them or not. And I'm not going to mention the name tonight. If you want to get the information from me, you can. But there's a serious problem in our country in that many of the foreclosures that are being dealt with through this sort of anomalous organization out of Delaware that these foreclosures have been sold into. And this particular family that I'm aware of wants to pay their mortgage, but can't find out what the payment is, can't find out who to send the money to, can't find out any information, and has appealed to our Attorney General, to his state senators and state representatives. And my suggestion might be that some pressure from our local politicians to our state politicians, and through them to our United States congressmen and United States senators, might begin to help clear this up, because it's such a heartbreaking thing to find out that I just want to make my mortgage payment, but I don't know where to make it to. No one will give me any information, but somebody's still coming and trying to take my house. So I just wanted to give you that little bit, and I can give you more detail, but I don't want to put those folks in that spot. So.
Thank you.
Dan, if you can have those people call or email me, I will try to help.
I will be happy to do that.
All right.
Thank you.
Then last thing I wanted to mention is, and I will update this information on the foreclosures as we move forward, but at least we have a baseline now. We're going to start measuring and tracking this every 6 months. I'll have new data to show you or tell you about, so we'll see if things are getting a little worse or getting a little better.
That's
and
good. Thank
we'll
you.
also have information about comparables. But the reason I did this wasn't just for curiosity. I also wanted to find out what the effect was on our code enforcement division.
Yes.
And I was pleased that the effects seem to be pretty minimal. We do have repeat customers, but they don't turn out to be necessarily in foreclosure. So there wasn't a big connection there that I was somewhat surprised by that. So we started looking at, this is one of the things that council in your goals is the city-county relationship and whether we could seek from them a payment in lieu of taxes. It's always a good idea, of course, to try to harvest hay when the sun's out. Right now, our relationship with the county over the dark fiber thing doesn't indicate that it's a good time to approach that.
I think you're probably right.
Now, I also wanted to update you on that dark fiber because we still have not had any response from the county, a counteroffer from Clackamas County on the city's half-price fee reduction for the dark fiber installation. So we're waiting. I think you remember back mid-December, December 14th was like the drum roll and a big deadline for everyone.
Right.
At least on the county side. We got the offer to them, I believe, on the 13th or 14th, and we've been waiting to hear back in a counteroffer. It's hard to negotiate if people aren't making counteroffers. But
Now, they sent us letters. Did you get a copy of that letter?
right.
Okay.
We got letters from them, but and the letters sort of indicated, well, we're not going to negotiate, and then
Yeah.
we are going to negotiate, and so we're ready to negotiate, but we have to hear from the other side.
Okay.
And we're still waiting patiently for that. We've been told, I think we were initially told it was early January, like the 3rd or 4th. One of their key staff people fell ill and was off for a few days. And then, we heard it was going to be right away after that, and that's been a week or so ago. So I just don't know. But we are waiting patiently. If I don't hear from them in a few more weeks, I'll probably send a letter of some kind to sort of ask them again if they want to negotiate further. Also, to segue from that, Mayor Neely in particular has asked me for a number with regard to the county's impact on Oregon City's property taxes. So what we did, and I've got a whole bunch of questions that poor Dave Wimmer, who's not here tonight, has had to grapple with over the last several months. And he's still assembling information for a more thorough report, but I do have a preliminary number for you. And the number that I'm going to give you is the number, if you total up all the county-owned property inside the city, and now I'm talking about just the city tax amount. So the amount of taxable money that would come to the city in the form of revenue. If you taxed all the county-owned properties inside the city as if they were privately owned instead of tax exempt, the total tax burden that they are not paying to the city is $768,385 a year. So it's a pretty significant amount. I doubt severely if there's any other city in the county that has that sort of impact because the biggest footprint of the county-owned property is here in Oregon City. So
You're right.
that is arguably also the amount of services that we are providing to the county that they aren't paying for. And I know that number sounds pretty large, but just on a single subdivision, a low-income subdivision that the county operates here, we spend over $100,000 a year just answering police calls in that single subdivision. So I do know that we provide a lot of service to the county, and that's the number. So Doug, you've been asking me for about 8 months for a number, and it is, again, $768,385. And that's all I have.
I see a couple people that want to respond. Sir, did you want to? Could you come?
We'll need to
be recorded.
General question.
That's okay.
My name is Richard Basic. I live in Oak Tree Terrace. Do we pay any fees to the county for services that they provide us?
We pay, all of us that live in the city at least pay a full panoply of county taxes.
Not taxes, I mean property or something comparable to what the dark fiber would be. In other words, do we
Does the city pay the county any franchise fees? Is that what you're asking? Counties by law aren't allowed to charge franchise fees
Okay.
because they're primarily rural.
I wouldn't send them a letter.
Kind of depends on what's in the letter, I think.
Yeah, I think it fits.
Right, those that speak first lose.
Sorry.
That's good advice not to negotiate against yourself.
Tom O'Brien, and I wanted to address something relative to your comments, City Manager, on the foreclosures. One of the concerns that I have beyond foreclosures, as a property owner in the city, I was really startled at the Friends of the Library luncheon. Mayor Neely was there. I don't believe anyone else in the room that I can think of was there at the time. But Linda Van Haverbeck made an announcement, and at the time she made it, the room suddenly became silent for about 20 seconds after her comment. She said that she had been talking to a neighbor or an acquaintance that she had here in the city, and that neighbor had tried to do a refi on their home. The refi was turned down, and the excuse that the bank gave them was that Oregon City is a blighted city. That concerns me. I may want to sell my property. There are a lot of us here who own property and may have a desire to sell it at some point. I think we need to take a very hard look at how we are presenting ourselves to the world. It's not our own little shell that we're belonging to. When the outside financial community looks at us and says, "You're blighted," we have a problem, folks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing more.
Okay, well, with that, we're going to close the study session. Well, come on, I closed it, but come on ahead.
I just have to think of something while we're having this meeting. Sorry? Your next commission meeting is next Wednesday, correct?
Correct.
A week from tomorrow, yeah.
And I'm out of town for the first time. I'm going to be gone for 5 days to Dallas. And I know you said I came prepared tonight for any deliberations you might make, but my concern is that, and it's been similar from other people, is that I'm not going to be here to defend myself during the citizens' comments of anything that anybody wants to change. We can all look at things from different angles, but I won't have a chance to be here if your deliberations take place that night. And my second concern is if you deliberate beforehand or during the meeting, I'm not sure. But following the process that you have so far, I went through a lot of stress to prepare for tonight, and I came here tonight. I want to make sure that if you decide that you're going to change things and open it up, that you reject me, as you said before, you were going to reject the candidates and you may go elsewhere. I would rather be rejected solely on the fact that I don't have qualifications than to be included in some other people. I just wanted to make that, because I'm not going to be here to say anything to you,
Well,
ladies and gentlemen.
I don't think, there's some people that I think want to talk about the process, and I would prefer they not, not talk about you.
Right.
The thing is, I think we know the process. Now, people might have a little bit of a different slant on it. You're the person that got interviewed.
I don't want to go through it again.
No, I
Well, you
understand.
won't. I don't think we would make you go through it again.
I don't think. I don't know why we necessarily
I don't
call
see
you
that.
forward.
No.
Actually,
It's just that I came prepared, and while you could ask other ones to come in later, then they listened to me and had weeks to decide, or a week.
Well, if
the
we
decision
were-
was already made to consider the three candidates.
I just was thinking, I'm going to be out of town
Yeah.
and far a distance away, and I wouldn't be able to be here to say anything about myself or defend
Okay.
myself.
That's
okay.
okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think with that we're adjourning into executive session. Right?
Thank you.